Hey there folks, it's good to see you. So I was looking around the internet recently and I found out that the NNR Rarity Festival has been going on for a little while. I missed the bus a little bit, I'm sorry. I've been sick and just generally out of it. I haven't been on this game a lot. So I ended up looking at decks that might interest me. While I found some cool stuff after the fact, like Metal Foes, which I'd really like to do a build for as well, this was what caught my attention the most. Shark is actually a deck that I hold very near and dear to my heart. It's one of the first TCG decks I started to play. I still kind of enjoy it. It's not all that good. Maybe it will be now that Kragan's out. But even still, it's just a cool deck to show off and play. In TCG, you're usually making like Stealth Kragan and Bahamut Shark summon totally awesome. We don't have any of those cards here. What we do have is a lot of the base pieces for the deck. Things like Buzzsaw Shark, things like Silent Angler, things like White Mirror. These cards are just at low rarity here and fully free to be played. So, there has to be something good here, right? Well, yeah, I'd say so. So, what Shark is ultimately aiming to accomplish is it's a rank 4 advantage spam deck, kind of. It doesn't make a ton of rank 4s, but it makes a rank 4 consistently and tries to get value out of it, as well as getting value out of its fish-type monsters. What this deck does that isn't really prevalent in the TCG builds is it has a lot of cards that win the game on their own, and also, thanks to the lower power level, we can actually manage to fit in some cool Synchro stuff via the white cards, White Mirror and White Stingray. So with all of this in mind, the Xyz plays, the advantage loops, the synchro creativity, the potential for game-winning cards, what's really in this deck? Well, why don't I show you? So this deck is held up mostly by the strength of its two main engines, the Hand Sharks and the Etko Sharks. These cards are very, very good. Starting with the Hand Sharks, Right Hand Shark is the main one, while you do still want to play a Left Hand Shark as a soft Garnet. Essentially what this card does is, when it's normal summon, it searches Left Hand Shark, and if this card is in the graveyard and you have no monsters, you can special summon it but banish it when it leaves the field. That does not apply if it is sent to the graveyard as Xyz material, and that's really what you're supposed to be doing. An Xyz monster that is summoned using only water monsters as material, including this card, gain the effect. This card cannot be destroyed by battle. So this provides battle protection, and this card provides card effect protection. They're pretty good together. The only downside is that Left Hand Shark is a 3, so it's a lot harder to access the card protection, but as long as you get them both in graveyard, they're a repeatable advantage engine that you can just spit out on an open board, make a rank 4 that has protection from battle, protection from card effects, and is just doing whatever it does as a rank 4. It's a really cool engine, and you can actually do quite a bit with it. Next on the shopping block are these, the Lantern Sharks and the Buzzsaw Sharks. Lantern Shark is an amazing card that gets you pretty much free extension. When it's normal or specialed, you activate the effect, and you special a level 3, 4, or 5 water monster from your hand in defense position. So it's basically turning every card in your hand into Silent Angler, except it doesn't have a restriction on it. The problem is you can't summon except for Xyz monsters, but as you can see, that's most of what we're playing. This card can allow for some funky lines where you go into like a rank 3, like Super Quantal Mech Beast or Shark Caesar. This card's actually amazing. But usually you're using this card for really cool 3 material rank 4 setups. Speaking of really cool rank 4 setups, what this card lacks in allowing you to go into big setups, it makes up for in consistency. This card gets fishes from your deck to be placed on the field, and then you can just Xyz into whatever. So while the shark base is really cool, what makes this deck strong is that water fish is just like a big archetype and is very strong. So we have some really cool extenders. Tin Goldfish is probably the most suspect of them, When it's normal summoned, you special summon a level 4 or lower monster, or one level 4 exactly monster from your hand. Ironically, this card goes really well in Gadget, another deck that kind of does the same thing, but is way less cool. No, I'm just kidding. I love Gadget, but it doesn't do a lot of the same stuff as this deck that I think puts it a cut above. Um, regardless, this deck, this card isn't a fish despite its appearances, and that's the biggest thing that holds it back. Regardless, there are some niche scenarios where you want this over like Tenyi Spirit Shathana or Silent Sea Nettle. This card isn't just an amazing extender. This, along with Buzzsaw Shark, is just a part of the constructed deck. If you control a water monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. The restriction almost never matters. You just make an Xyz and go off. White Stingray seems like a bad extension card, but it actually helps a lot. Not only can it go really well with right hand Shark, in the terms of like normal right hand, grab left hand, discard left hand for White Stingray, bring back left hand, go into a 3-mat rank 4. It also unlocks synchro plays for you, turning your White Mirror into, as long as you have a White Stingray in deck, or as long as you have a White Stingray in graveyard, your White Mirror becomes a Synchro 8, which is just pretty amazing, to be honest, especially in this lower power format. So the aforementioned White Stingray line is available to you, and it's just an amazing recovery tool, right? Like, having 3 Reborns is just good. This card right here, Whitefish Salvage, seems like a worse salvage. Salvage is in the format, and it is still a +1. However, the difference in this deck is that Whitefish Salvage is repeatable. This card is actually pretty amazing. So you play it, target 1 fish monster in your graveyard, and add it to your hand. You can only use that effect once per turn, but who cares? You're getting a free card for pretty much nothing. And if it's destroyed by an opponent's card effect, it's Rhoda. Or it's a free special from deck. That is amazing in this deck, and simply awesome. You can do a scenario where you set this with a bunch of cards on field, and your opponent maybe like blind MSTs it and just gives you a card for free. Either way, this is just amazing and will always, 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 well, usually almost always get you more advantage than Salvage ever would. We have 3 MSTs in the deck. We need it, especially considering that we need our place to go through, and 2 Book of Moon just for disruption reasons. Torrential Tributes in this game at rare. What the fuck, Konami? Excuse my language. And we have 2 Compulsory Evacuation Device for non-destruction removal. To round it out, we have 3 Numbers Protection. So this card's kind of suspect in this deck specifically. It's going to require you to spend a few gems, 1,500 to be exact. This only comes in the Utopia Structure deck, and you only get 1 copy of this per deck. It's unfortunate, but the Utopia stuff's pretty alright anyway. They have good cards in there, like Xyz Change Tactics, and just all the good Onomat stuff. It's probably worth your investment anyway, and if you're playing this game, especially if you did the Xyz Festival, you probably already have this card. If you don't, I do highly recommend it. My gems definitely recovered after I managed to buy this card up. However, if it doesn't seem like this card is going to be within your gem price range, Xyz Block should do most of the same thing, but it's just not the same. This is nearly an Omni Negate. It is worth noting, however, this only works if you have a numbers card, but it does float. It comes back. Other main deck considerations is stuff like Lost Wind, maybe. I can see that with like bigger monsters, but a lot of the time the biggest monster you'll be seeing is like a Megalith Phaleg, which you can't really Lost Wind or anything like that. But hey, so I think this is probably the optimal way to be setting this up. But the main deck isn't everything in this deck. Starting with a couple Synchros, which is really weird to see in a rank 4 deck, but man, you know how it is. Anyway, Enlightenment Paladin is kind of a sussy card. You never get the first effect, but when this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can inflict damage equal to that monster's original attack. This has come up in cases, and it can help with board cracking. More likely, though, you're going to be making Judgment the Dragon of Heaven. This card is just a 3k beater with downside, to be honest with you. However, thanks to Queen Dragoon Jin, you can actually summon this card back, and 3k is a lot in this format. After that, we have a couple rank 4s. After that, we have a couple rank 3s, which are not amazing, but they will get the job done. Shark Caesar is actually a huge threat. I just mentioned that 3k is a lot of attack to have. This card can get up way beyond that, functionally. And Super Quantal Mech Beast is removal, so you're probably playing it. I can't think of a better card for this position. As for your rank 4s, you have a lot of really good options. I was actually playing with an incomplete extra deck, but this is what I decided was probably best after some testing. So starting with Photon Papilloperative, this is just a way to sometimes combat trick out your opponents, but usually this is clearing pesky set cards. Also, it will almost always run into Gradle Cobra, in the same way that Numbers Protection will always be hit by your opponent's MST. Regardless, this is a pretty solid card and saw constructed play for a while, so, it's good. Queen Dragoon Jin was already discussed. Like I said, Judgment the Dragon of Heaven is just really good with this card, and it actually has its downside negated, which is really funny. We have 2 number 50 Black Ship of Corn. As it turns out, giving this card any sort of protection makes it really good. Dealing 1,000 damage is nothing to sneeze at, and a lot of monsters in this format actually cap out at 21. It's like 30, 24, 21. Those are the main benchmarks, and this hits everything under that 21 benchmark. It actually also hits all the 21s as well. So, that's pretty cool. This card right here, number 91, is kind of a sleeper hit. So you need 3 level 4 monsters, which is a lot, but this card is like Judgment Dragon. So it's actually not that bad. Speaking of not that bad, number 104 Masquerade actually surprised me a lot. If you get this card with protection, it's actually going to be really hard for your opponent to out. They can't like making this with a line of like right hand shark, white stingray, left hand shark actually makes this pretty hard to kill. And more importantly, a lot of cards in this format do things like float or activate in graveyard or do a lot of that stuff. But that's happening in the battle phase, and Masquerade will have none of that. It even deals a little bit of burn damage for your troubles. Also, if your opponent is attempting to get in with something like a Time Lord and really messing up your board, you can also negate the effects on their turn. It is just an extremely solid card. Also, if you need to find out if your opponent's on Megalith, you can always send the top card and just see if it's a ritual. This card right here is not tested, but I do think it probably has good potential. This card can just help you get over big threats, which I noticed is a big problem for this deck. So, I think it's probably pretty solid. Okay, look, it's come up. I've actually gotten lethal with this card before. This card is just a fun of. You're probably never making it in a serious match, but sometimes you can't think of anything better to go first, or you're running out of options, so go off. Number 52, Diamond Crab King, is weird in this deck. Certainly, you don't mind being able to hit in for 3k, and having a big booty that most cards can't get over is usually pretty helpful. But giving this card protection is actually usually counterintuitive, because you kind of actively want to go to the graveyard, especially if you have a Numbers Protect. Numbers Protect in general interacts weirdly with this card, but Numbers Protect also works pretty nicely with Torrential Tribute. If you have to Torrential with a number monster on board, hey, at least you get your spell, at least you get your trap back. Anyway, for the last card in the deck, I have 2 Gagaga Samurai. This card isn't in here because it's so amazing at 2, but the first one can usually be outed pretty easily because of its small attack stat. Regardless, this can make huge pushes for damage, and I really can't recommend it enough. I definitely think that this card is worth at least 1 slot. So here's the deck, and I think that it's pretty solid overall. I will show you some games I played with it to kind of get a feel for some of the combos and talk through what was happening against a bunch of different decks, including Sylvan's, Gadget, and most importantly, Megalith. I'll see you soon. This is the first showcase, and it's up against Sylvan's. This is a pretty good opener, and we happen to be going first. This is to show some of the synchro plays that the deck can get into. We're going for a bit of a modest setup here. Normal Goldfish, Special White Stingray, make Diamond Crab Rave, set Compulse, and pass. That should be all we really need for this first turn. Our opponent is similarly slow, just electing for a T set. Yeah, sure. Start turn, and ooh, Tin Goldfish, a good rip. For now, though, we have our best card in hand, so we're going to try and do something with that instead. We send White Stingray, activate White Mirror, get the White Stingray back, treat it as a tuner, normal the second White Stingray, and make Enlightenment Paladin. This is one of the major synchro plays the deck can make to help make a big push. So we got some big beaters on board right now. They attempt to Malcat on Tactic. We chain the Compulse, and it seems like we're going to get in for a pretty big push here. It's a little silly that the deck is allowed to do this. I really wasn't expecting the Malcat there. One of the things that this replay is going to be very good for, which I'm about to show you, is how good this deck can be against even strong combo decks. Our Diamond Crab King switches back. We'll activate again. Our opponent T-sets again, which is a little bit concerning. The reason why is because this is Sylvan's, so we're going to Kumo Shrumo and pop off a little bit. This is not a huge deal. Chaos Necromancer, very funny card. And just go for a big chain to punish our little play here. That being said, the problem with this is, even if this is cool and all, the Sylvan train has started, and we really need to be ending this game quickly before things get too much worse for us. For now, though, we're not under a ton of threat. We're just getting a couple extra small bodies out. Ugh, hitting another Sylvan on the mill. I understand most of the deck is Sylvans, but even still. Enlightenment Paladin gets in for 100, keep that in mind, and we get in with the Diamond Crab King, return it to defense again, and end up passing, because we cannot do much more. We have a Tribute for Guardioak. That mills a few more cards, getting a few more triggers, and the game needs to end very soon, or this is going to be pretty bad. These chains of 4 can be so devastating, and that destruction on the Crab King, while probably not necessary, people don't really read Crab King a lot, definitely hurts. Fortunately, they don't get a mill there. They only get in for 25, and the turn is passed back to us. Even still, they're way ahead on cards, so we should try and do something about this. Draw. That's Torrential. That's pretty good. Normal Goldfish, activate Lantern, special the Leaf Fish, send Shark, and go 1, 2, 3 into this card, number 91, Thunderspark Dragon. This is exact lethal. We clear the board, activate Lifeless Leaf Fish for a little bit of insurance to just make sure that if that back row is real, we have no problem. We get in for exact lethal. This is game 2, and this is against Gadget. I wanted to show that this deck doesn't just have to beat these inevitable decks. It can also beat decks that try to outgrind it. They start the game off, and yeah, that looks like a pretty ideal Gadget hand. Set 3 back row, get some gadgets, go into Iron Wolf is pretty solid. Oh well, that doesn't matter. We can work through this. One of the biggest strengths of this deck is that it can just kind of keep spitting out advantage, which we're about to see. We normal the Lantern Shark, special the Buzzsaw Shark, trigger the Buzzsaw Shark effect, target itself, and get Needle Sealing. That is devastating, but ultimately fine. We activate Whitefish Salvage and also decide to try and bring out our right-hand shark. That sadly gets bottom list, which is just so unfortunate, but we salvage, get back Lantern Shark, and pass the turn. Despite all of that interruption, we're still a couple cards up. Oh, sorry, 1 card up. They get in for only a little bit here. I mean, this is typical of Gadgets. They just keep going, right? Alright, our turn. We draw, and ooh, White Mirror is a sick rip. We're just going to go for the line again. Lantern Shark into Buzzsaw Shark into, yep, another right hand. And this one becomes Masquerade. Masquerade is one of the best cards in this deck. Oh, and it gets compulsed. That's a shame. We do still get our right hand shark back, though. Get rid of the Leaf Fish, and special the White Stingray for Gagaga Samurai. I feel this was probably pretty good against Gadgets because it can just kind of run over them. We go into White Mirror and bring back the White Stingray. Another strength of this deck that you're about to see is this deck is actually pretty forgiving. I forgot that I can't special White Stingray twice, but I'm about to get away with it. We're getting in for some good damage here, too. Oh, poor Guard Dragon. Anyway, back to our opponent's turn, and oof, another gold Gadget. It's unfortunate. Red Gadget to get yet another one. This deck is just so crazy. I love this deck a lot, but I unfortunately just like Shark a little bit more. They're going to get rid of my Gaga Samurai, deal 1,000 to me, and forget that they can't attack. They pass the turn, and it's back to us. Ooh, Numbers Protect. That is an amazing rip. We send a Angler off of Leaf Fish and go into Diamond Crab Rave. And this is yet another mistake. I forgot to put it in attack position. That's what you should be doing in these later stages, but oh well. We ended up getting another back row and a Whitefish Salvage to bring back our right-hand shark. That probably wasn't the best idea. We probably should have brought back the Lantern Shark, but whatever. One of the big advantages of this deck is if you can get right and left-hand shark in your graveyard, that's just a repeatable rank 4 every turn, as long as your board is clear. We hit with the Numbers Protect. Black Ship of Corn gets nothing. Oh boy. Infinitrack Anchor Drill is a big, big, big problem on this board, and it's about to get bigger. They are overlaying for a rank 8 Dragooblion. Why is this in NR format? Anyway, they end up making Heart Earth Dragon, which I quickly compulse. One of the cool things about this Diamond Crab Rave, I believe, was it was made with a right-hand shark. If I'm mistaken, we're just crashing here. Anyway, we get back the Lantern Shark and are free to pop off just a little bit more. We end up overlaying like this for a Black Ship of Corn. We end up... Yeah, I guess we do just crash. That's frankly incredible. But we end up getting Numbers Protection back. That's why we made Black Ship. On top of being an amazing card, this card also just protects your cards. Yet another mistake here. I forgot that I'd already activated Salvage and didn't have White Stingray. They can't beat this board, they pick it up, and we take the game. And here it is, the format Boogeyman. While I do usually recommend just scooping in against Megalith, it'll feel a lot better and waste a lot less of your time. Sometimes you have to play these out, and I really wanted to show that this deck has game even against probably the best deck in the format. They end up getting a Pencil Plume into a Talismandra, get Foul Egg after revealing a Haggith, and get Incantation Inception. Sure. Just get out the Haggith, whatever. End up triggering the Haggith, grabbing Megalith Unformed, and, well, we're going to continue going. Get rid of the Haggith, and bring out the Fool. I love the flavor of Megaliths, but they are so annoying in this format. Anyway, trigger Fool, bring back the Haggith. This is just typical Megalith plays, but they are going pretty far off in my opinion. We get that Talismandra to return the Incantation Inception, and that is pretty good. In case it's seeming like I'm not talking a lot, well, guess what? That's what this format is like when you play against Megalith. Just scoop. They're just doing it to ladder whore. We send a couple here, more incantations, that wasn't even necessarily a good hand, to get the Foul Egg. They end up passing on this board, which is going to make Bathor. There's not much I can do about that. I set 3 cards and get out the Buzzsaw Shark. They make a big mistake here. They Bathor before I manage to get my Buzzsaw Shark activation out, actually. What you want to do is wait for me to have triggered it. I understand that's kind of counterintuitive because it gets me a different monster, but really you just want to be clearing my monsters. I have a lot harder of a time recovering from that. In this case, I get to White Mirror. This is a fantastic showcase of the cards that just win the game in your deck. Anyway, I still get to trigger the Buzzsaw Shark. Isn't that broken? And get a right-hand shark for the battle protection. We're going to make a Black Ship of Corn just to clear the Bathor. That Phaleg is a massive issue, but I'm going to deal with it later. Anyway, our opponent draws, and they still have 3 cards in hand. Isn't this deck so silly? They go and get rid of this Haggith for Fool, Portal, you know the play. Ultimately, what this is going to result in is a couple of Bathor pops and 2 Phalegs on field, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, out comes the Bathor for Bathor. Bathor trigger, destroy that and that. Ooh, they hit the wrong card, probably. I can't actually tell. I compulse the Bathor and get that out of there. Anyway, it's their turn to Bathor again, get rid of the Fool, and go for another Phaleg. This is lethal on board, 8,000. Oh, more than that, sorry. But it's not more than Torrential. Torrential, the game is effectively over. I have 3 cards in hand, including a starter, as well as Book of Moon. They have lost all their resources and the game. Well, we're back with the deck, and wow. That looked really good. I didn't really cherry pick games for you either. I'd say I had close to like an 85% win rate, and that's only because I scoop against Megalith players. It's not worth my time. Anyway, I think that the biggest thing you could be doing with this deck is probably seeing how you could change the ratios around just a little bit. I think that Whitefish Salvage and Left Hand Shark are the places you should be looking for, and if you think that you have better back row than Compulse and Book of Moon, go for it. I think that this deck is mostly set in stone, at least in the monster department, but you can afford to experiment with the spell traps. Don't get rid of Whitemere, don't get rid of Torrential Tribute, and play at least 2 of this. These cards are simply amazing and have won me so many games. As far as the extra deck goes, you probably don't need Enlightenment Paladin, you probably don't need Shark Caesar, but having corner case stuff is good. Regardless, don't be afraid to put in like 3 mat rank 4s in this deck. You can certainly make them a lot of the time. And just generally don't be afraid to experiment around with it. This format is kind of exceedingly cheap, so if you really like it, keep playing it. Go for it. So when I make a deck like this, I usually like to rate it on a 6-point system between durability, consistency, power, advantage, versatility, and ease of play. So I'm going to give Shark some ratings on each of these to see how I feel about them. So starting with durability, this deck is extremely durable, mostly thanks to the hand sharks more than anything, and with a little bit of help for recovery from the white mirrors. This deck can usually manage to get you out of most any jam you find yourself in, and it has a lot of good protection elements to it that allow you to stay in the game. It's actually really rare that you'll find yourself dead in the water with this deck. I give its durability a 9 out of 10. Consistency. There are some suspect hands with this deck. I won't lie about that. The only times I ever lost were really like I'm getting outpushed by a Danger or Megalith player, or I just bricked on all my cards. Regardless, these times are few and far between, and generally speaking, you won't draw a hand of Silent Angler, Whitefish, Compulse too often. And even if you do, that's not bad. I'll give it an 8 out of 10. Power. Unfortunately, as a control deck, this deck is kind of lacking in ways to kill your opponent. However, from cards like Whitemere and Torrential Tribute, I really have to vouch for its ability to make big plays, and cards like Gaga Samurai can still give this deck some bite. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Advantage. I am this close to giving it a 10 out of 10. It's only barely beaten out by good Megalith hands and above average Danger hands. Those are the only things I can think of that can actually out-advantage this thing. Gadget can't do it. Metal Foes can't do it. Bad Danger hands and decent Megalith hands can't do it either. Regardless, there have been times where I've just sat with 3 cards and my opponent's sitting with 12, so I can't give it a 10 out of 10, but 9.5. This deck is really, really hard to outgrind, and I think that's a massive selling point for it. Cards like Whitefish Salvage and Lifeless Leaffish are amazing recovery tools. Versatility. The game plan is simple. Make a rank 4, or sometimes a Synchro 8. Mostly rank 4s though. But because it's a rank 4 deck, you have a pretty extensive toolbox with cards from Photon Papilloperative to Black Ship of Corn to having Thunderspark, Masquerade, Diamond Crab King, Gaga Samurai, or even those niche scenarios where you need something like a Crazy Box. This deck is really, really good at getting you what you need, and a lot of the time, thanks to Hand Sharks, you have pretty good protection. I'll give it an 8 out of 10 because this game plan is simple, but what you can go into and toolbox into is not. Ease of play. It's kind of hard to say, right? There are certainly mistakes to make with this deck, but this deck is very, very forgiving. I've made multiple mistakes while playing this deck, and it let me get away with it because, one, either my opponent was playing a worse deck, or two, this deck is just silly and plays really, really good cards. So, while I'd say that it isn't like good or great because I did make those mistakes, it let me get away with them pretty well. I'd give this an 8 out of 10. Overall, that's where we ended up with Shark. I really, really hope you guys give this deck out a try out. I've been playing it for like 6 hours to make sure I got good games for this and, just to grind Master Duel. And I had a really, really great time. So, I'll catch you on the flip side. Subscribe for more, and have a lovely night, YouTube.